Okay, all right, welcome. Today we're going to be having Eli from Yale University talking about editing and editing in film. So we're very excited to have Eli today from Yale, and I'll be sharing my screen so that we can see Eli's presentation. We're very excited to get started. And we'll be resuming the regular film screening at about 6:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, and we're going to be getting started now. All right, one moment. Okay, Eli, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Eli. It's so nice to meet you guys. I go to Yale, and we're going to talk today about patience, passion, and post-production, and basically editing. And we're going to talk about just like things I've learned as an editor on a lot of different films. So next slide. Great. So about me, I go to Yale. I'm a director, writer, editor. I do sort of all three, but sometimes I won't write in a film. But I almost always direct and edit all my films. I've done 20 short films, shown them at different festivals, and basically I work in like all genres, documentary, narrative, and experimental. And I like to sort of combine them. And I think things I've learned editing documentaries I bring to narratives, and narratives I bring to experimentals. I've also edited music videos, virtual concerts, theater projections, and like a bunch of different stuff. And I've worked in post-production at Jezebel Productions in New York City. They're like a documentary social issue sort of production company. And I've sort of seen how they work through and edit their films. And right now I'm in LA and I'm working on internships. Also, feel free, any questions, you can ask me at the end. You can also interrupt if you want to. I really want to get to know all of you guys too. Yeah, I'm super excited. Um, so when I think about editing, I feel like it's the end all be all sort of. I've seen great films not be so great because of editing, and I've seen like bad scripts be amazing because of editing. So I think editing just has an enormous power. And go to the next slide. So when I think about editing, I'm going to use this metaphor here, and this is called cutting the onions. So imagine like a final film as the meal, and we're going to use this metaphor. Stick with me for a second. But basically, before you cook a meal, you need to like pre-make the meal, right? You need to cut the onions, you need to cut all the vegetables, so the chef can like make the salad. And with editing, this is really important. The assistant editor is almost like a sous chef, right? They have to cut the onions and organize all the footage and get it all ready so you can basically cook with the ingredients the film. And the cooking part is the passion part. It's the part that's really fun. But before you can do all that, you have to like organize everything and get ready to do that. And this is really annoying and it takes a very long time to do. And trust me, I've spent hours and hours logging footage, but it is extremely important because if you're not organized, everything sort of falls through and you don't want like a chunky onion soup, I guess. But basically the final film is the finished meal and you need to be organized. So if we can go to the next slide. I'll start with documentaries and how to sort of get organized and get ready to start editing a documentary. This is in the back here, this is a still from a film I did called Think Like a Filmmaker. It's a doc about my dad. Basically, for that film, I had 6 hours of footage and I cut it down to 6 minutes. So basically, in order to do that, I needed to know my footage. And before I started editing, I spent a huge amount of time going through it and making subclips of this like 3 hour long interview and naming each subclip and giving it a title and putting it into bins and creating a file structure. And I really had to do that in order to edit this. And that's what I do. With documentaries, the story might not be totally there when you're making it, but it's really important in order to be able to craft the story in a documentary, to be able to know what footage and let the footage sort of dictate what you do. And having, when he talked about he's an artist, so he talked about like his sculpture work, and I would, in out subclip, here's him talking about his culture work, and I work in Premiere, and I put that in a bin, and then I would make a bunch of them, and then from there, once I start editing, I can use everything organized well. I also love to be like playful with my footage and documentary. Like I like to go and pick random shots and just put them together. And that helps me to get to know the footage even before I start editing. So I'll make like a little sizzle reel of each film I do before I actually go into like the in-depth process of editing it. We can go to the next slide. For fiction, it's sort of like you have the recipe. There's a recipe, there's a script, but you still need to cut the onions, unfortunately. I think what I do with a fiction film is I watch everything, and I have to get to know my footage. So I like, get into it. I watch every footage, and I sort of take notes of my footage, both for continuity and performances. I organize it by scene, shot number. I'll have like every bin, I'll have like a scene 1, 2, 3, and then I'll have shot 1A and then take 1, 2, 3. So I really like to organize that because then it makes the editing just way more easy than if everything's sort of jumbled up. We can go to the next slide. For experimental films, I've made a bunch of weird experimental films. You'll see clips, by the way, from a lot of my films throughout this presentation. And then I'll put a link to them maybe at the end. I have my website there. But anyway, this is a film I made called Swimming in Light about like fish in aquariums. But what I do with experimental films, once I have all my footage, is I make associations with like light and color and feeling. And here, for example, these are 2 shots. They're both underwater. One is like water in a cave area, and the other is a jellyfish floating. And I basically just saw them and I was like, ooh, these could go well together. So I put them together. And you can see there's like a light there, and it was a really nice cut, but that was because when I was going through it, I sort of made note of that. And I also labeled them both as like blue shots. So I'm making an experimental film, I'll have like blue, I'll have a bin, like a file called blue, and I'll put all the blue shots in there. And I'll have another one called like, for this film, I have one called movement. And I put all shots that I thought could like go under movement in there. And basically, there was one like fish swimming left to right. You'll see clips of the film. It's sort of crazy, but fish swimming left to right, and I would take multiple shots of fish swimming left and right, put them in the same bin, and then when I'm editing it, I can just take, and have fun making it. We can go to the next one. Okay, that's the boring part. Basically, once you've assembled everything, once you've organized it, then the fun begins, which is this passion where you can actually like create something. I'm a musician. You'll see me use a lot of like musical terms throughout this presentation. But with documentary and experimental filmmaking, it's all about crafting the story because you don't have a script. And the way I work, at least, is I have no clue what the film is going to be when I'm working on it. So it's a lot about creating a type of arc. And with fiction, you have something already, but you want to sort of create a tone. And what I like to think about it is I like to visualize this. So in music, sometimes I'll make graphic scores, which I'll say like, I want the tempo to start here and then go up to here. And I'll like draw out a line. Or it can be like an arc, right? It goes up and down. And it's fun to do that for filmmaking too. So if you think, I want it to start slow and then you draw that out, that's really helpful for me at least. Or if you say, I want it to start static and then go crazy, that's another way to do it. And it's fun to like draw that out. And with this film, which is Cross Current, just an experimental film I made entirely based off of computer circuits, that's what I tried to do. I tried to start static and then go crazy. And Mark, if you would you play like 7 seconds of the first clip on the left, and hopefully you can. Can we get audio? Yeah. There. Okay. I couldn't really see that, but if everyone else could, then we're good. But yeah, so I can also describe that too. Basically, imagine static cuts of green circuit boards. It's hard to imagine, but they went cut, and it was like a very static type of thing. Now, if you play the one on the right, and hopefully,
Yes, Eli, yeah. You might not be able to see it, but we're sharing screen for the students.
Great.
Great.
So this is an example of it starting very static and then sort of going crazy. And you can do this and bring it to narrative films, and I'll show examples of this, but you can make it so, maybe at a point of conflict, the beginning starts slower, and you think of it as like a line, and then it sort of builds up with faster cuts, and then that sort of brings up conflict. So I think it's about bringing these experimental techniques that I've learned through experimental filmmaking into sort of narrative filmmaking. So maybe go to the next slide. Fiction editing. This is a still from a film I recently shot. It's all about suspension of disbelief. That's the first thing. You never want to take the audience out of the story. And it's all about continuity. You want to communicate everything really clearly, and that's step one, right? And if everything's communicated clearly, that's like you've done something. The next thing, like the next step, I feel like in narrative editing is elevating the subtext. I should have put a clip here, but there's a film that I did where basically it was a scene between two people, and I kept cutting to a record player turning around. And I think that really created a tone and feel for the scene, as well as moved it forward and sort of created an example of the connection those two people had. So I think using B-roll effectively can really elevate the subtext. Also, you need to listen to your footage when you're editing. That's all you have, right? You shoot something, you just have that footage. You have your script, yes, but the footage is what you have. And if something you wrote in the script, maybe the camera is shaky for that part, so you might not be able to use that. So I think using the script as a starting point is always important. But once you're editing, again, all you have is the footage. You need to make that work. So I think I like to edit without using the script at all. I know what the story I'm trying to tell, but I just use the footage and what it's telling me, and I edit based off of that. And if there's a line of dialogue that worked on the script, that worked on the page, but might not work in the movie, I'll take that out. And sometimes you have a director, and again, I'm a director editor, but a lot of times they're separate, and you don't have much freedom. But if you can, I think sometimes changing the script and improvising and maybe even moving scenes around can be really, really helpful. Also, I think something that gets lost a lot is transitions between scenes. There's this idea in Hollywood that I learned from in classes called the neutral frame. And this basically means that in between two scenes of like dialogue, you have the way to transition between them is a shot of nothing, or not of nothing, sorry, of like a B-roll shot or an insert. So people have a chance to like digest what just happened. Like for example, if somebody's like reading a document, you cut to the document and then move on to the next scene. And that's, I think, a really important thing in a lot of narrative movies, because a lot of them just go scene, but really focusing on transitions and writing them into the script, I think, can really help that. But again, you have to be playful with editing. Editing is just a playful thing. You have to try things. And I think using the script as a blueprint, but then moving away from that can be really fun and make your film just that much more exciting. Next slide. Are we there at the next slide? I can't see it.
Yes, we are. Is your internet connection stable?
I think so. Here. I can also.
No, that's okay. I can reshare.
Sorry, my bad.
It's okay. Is it good now?
I can't really, but I can also pull it up on my end and just follow along with you guys.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, where were we? Whoa, my computer's going crazy. Okay. So give me 1 second here. Wait. Sorry. Okay. Were we on? Is there like a documentary and experimental editing thing we're up right now?
Yes, yes.
So a lot of times you don't fully know the story when you start a documentary or experimental film. You may have an idea about it, but you never know how it's going to turn out. And with my last film, or with my last documentary, the one about my dad, that again you'll see some clips on later on. I had no clue what the film was going to be until I sort of made it. And with that, I had a bunch of different versions of the film. And basically, the film is about him being my dad, an artist, father to son type of thing. And I found the structure of that film as I edited it. And basically, at the beginning, you know, he was my dad at the beginning, but I realized it'd be more interesting to have like an arc if you found that out at the end. So I sort of figured that out at one of my versions, but it took a minute to get that. And then once I had that, that sort of made the whole film. I feel like documentaries in general, you know, when they're just talking heads, blah, 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 it's a little less interesting than when they have an arc similar to that of a narrative film, where there's some conflict when there's that type of arc. And again, you find it based on your footage. With that film, again, I had 6 hours and I had to make it into 6 minutes. So a lot of it was being, what can I have here? What can I put there? And in that film, it was really just about finding it. And I had probably like 15, 20 different versions of the film, which maybe was too many, but it was hard to decipher. But once I had that one thing sort of clicked it in. And with experimental films too, it's that line again, it's the starting here and ending there and creating an arc within that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we're at the tone slide, sorry. Okay. Tone. Tone is sort of hard to talk about because it's so like abstract. But for me, I think it's about thinking about what's the feeling that you want to convey. What do you want the audience to feel at a specific moment? And using the videos, audio, pacing, and storytelling techniques to sort of make that happen. For the right tone basically allows viewers to sort of connect with it and again feel what you sort of want them to feel. I feel like it's all a feeling, it's all a vibe, and you sort of gotta make it right. If you want to, this clip here was of this documentary that I keep talking about with my dad, that I wanted it to be very playful. Like I wanted it to have a playful tone. And basically I put some jappy jazz music and a little montage of him spray painting some stuff to try to give it this sort of playful, fun tone. So if you want to play that clip. Take one.
Interview take one.
Yeah. It should be starting at like 13 seconds.
I guess I would call it media sculpture. I'm making sculpture out of different media and combining them. Basically, at the core, I'm trying to take my experience as a filmmaker.
Okay, I paused the video.
Great. Awesome. So yeah, so in that I really wanted to create this sort of like upbeat type of fun tone to sort of start the movie and carry through it. And I made this little montage at the beginning. That's actually one of the first things I did for this film to sort of create that. And again, if you want like a more reflective, contemplative tone, you can make, you know, stretch it out longer. And it sort of goes hand in hand with the next slide, which is rhythm. Yeah, can we go to the next slide?
Yes, we're on the next slide now.
Sorry, it's a little behind for me. Yeah, so rhythm and pacing. I really like to feel each cut. It's like for me, like composing, like I want to be able to like clap to them almost. And what I do with each film is I literally go to each cut and I'm like, does this feel right for me? And I do that over and over and over and over again. And again, it's tedious, but it's really fun. And I think your film gets a lot better from that. And you should be able to feel each cut. And with here, if you can go ahead and play the first clip up there. This is from the experimental film.
Okay.
Yeah. You can cut it there.
Okay.
Anyway, you should have seen there was a shot of like an eye turning really quickly. And with that, I tried to make it like a long cut so you could sort of get into this weird, it's a sort of crazy film. It's basically just fish swimming around for 5 minutes, but again, it has some type of arc to it. It starts out with these long shots of like underwater with this crazy score, and then turns again as you get to the end into really fast cuts. But there it's like these longer sort of cuts, and then there's the shot of the eye. So I wanted it to be like long, long, eye, long, long, and it sort of goes through this rhythm that I really tried to make it there. If you go to the next one, this is bring this into a narrative context. This film, disclaimer, is not done yet. I am working on it right now as we speak. It's a narrative film. Basically, the context of the scene, the mother just died of this dad and kid, and the dad is trying to connect with the kid, but I wanted to sort of show their disconnect through long pauses of editing, and sort of their driving. And this, I wanted to create like a longer, more reflective type of tone here. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, Eli, do you want me to play the second video on the rhythm pacing slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you skip to around 3 minutes in, actually? Sorry. Maybe 3:30. Yeah. 3:30, yeah. It'll be a little bit after this. Okay, this is fine. And the sound too. Sorry.
Hey, how was school?
Good.
I hear there's going to be laser tag at Micah's party.
I don't want to go.
That's where we're driving to, kiddo.
I want to go home.
Yeah, you can cut it there.
Okay.
Anyway, as you can see with that one, I really sort of stretched out these pauses and these shots to make it longer, to really show their disconnection. And the father is trying to talk to the son. The son's not really responding there. And that was like, I really wanted that to almost feel like the viewer is sitting there, and it's like a really almost uncomfortable scene. And that was sort of my goal there. And again, that was like the slow type of pacing. Next slide.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. When you're editing, what happens is you see your first cut, and it's always terrible. That's how it goes, or that's at least how it goes for me. If it's not for you, you're doing a good job. But I always see my first cut and it feels terrible. And it's important to watch your film in full after you do your rough cut a bunch of times, however tragic it may feel. But basically, I like to think that almost anything can be changed in editing, and any film can be saved. That's sort of what I like to believe. And I made a film recently that at the time when I first started editing it, it didn't feel like it was fully working. And I basically sat with this film like day after day, over and over again, trying to get it to work. And this film is called The Audition, and I made it recently. And basically, in the first scene, I felt like it's about a young pianist who has a weird experience while painting, but I'll just show you the first scene here. In the first cut, it felt like you didn't feel his struggle enough throughout the film. It felt just too like monotone. Like I really wanted him to feel like he was more struggling and giving up with his piano playing. So this is the same scene twice here. And I'll show you the first cut, and then I'll show you how I re-edited it. So if we go to the first one on the left. Thank you. Yeah, we can go. Also, again, I'll put there should be links to this. I can put my website in at the end. And yeah. But if we go to the one on the right, it's the same clip, but re-edited to make him feel like he's struggling more as a musician. Yeah, we can go. But basically what I did in between those two was I went back through all of my footage that was, logged because I cut the onions. But I basically went back to every performance and was like, I can make this a more interesting scene. And the way I did that basically was just giving it more time to pause, more space in there. And I think space gives a lot to the characters, gives a lot to the performances, let them shine a little bit. And in that case, made the ending, I think, pay off a little bit, like a lot more. And having that small change in there, I think really just helped it. And again, I did that for a lot of scenes in this movie. And I do that for every movie right now. I have my own, this other film I'm working on, you saw a clip of it. That scene actually right now where I'm editing it is totally different than it just was, but it has the same vibe, but it's just a constant revision. And it takes time, but I don't know. I find it really fun when I'm editing this. I really get lost in it a lot. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Great, sound design. I worked on a feature documentary called The Land of Azaba, where I was able to watch and sit in on their sound design, and I was sort of a PA for them. And basically what surprised me was how many layers of sound they had. This film was a nature documentary. They had hundreds of different sounds. And I think layers makes a soundscape really interesting. And it's important when you're doing sound, because you guys, I don't have a sound designer, I just do it myself. And I think it's important when you guys are doing it to think of layers, to really be able to have fun with it and to play with it and to create almost like a layered soundscape. The one thing is you have to make sure the voice is loudest in comparison to sound effects in music, because a lot of people want to make the music all the way up. But it's important to sort of, I think also a lot of times, especially seeing this in student films, and I've been guilty of this myself, but there's this tendency to almost put pure silence under a dialogue scene, which can work in some cases, and it's important to have silence. But I think there's no such thing as like pure silence. Like there needs to be some type of room tone. And that's just like something that I see a lot, because it's really weird because there's always sound in the world. And it's important to have that under, I think, under dialogue scenes especially. And it's also, it makes it more interesting if there are people walking outside and you hear a dog barking in the background and stuff like that. And again, it can sort of elevate the subtext, but it's fun to just have fun with it. And that's what I did on this, back to this crazy experimental film. And you can play a little bit of that there if you would like. Okay, we can go there. But basically, as you sort of heard, I wanted there to be like a contrast with it. So it started, you hear that's a mixture of actually a bunch of sound effects that I put in, and experimental music score by this really great composer named Luke Ferrari. But basically it starts out, they're probably like, the sound just bubbles a lot. So through there's a bunch of different like layered sounds. There's the drill things, there's a bunch of them. And then it's sort of, I wanted it to sort of, you hear the whale howls and these weird sounds, then all of a sudden it goes out. And there has to be, I think in a film like this, there has to be some contrast. It had to be like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, if that makes sense. And I wanted that moment with the jellyfish to be like a really ethereal moment there. Also, freesound.org, guys, that is so helpful. You can find everything there, all sounds. But I just had fun with it for that one. And but layering it there, that was a really fun task for me to just be able to like put in a huge amount of sound there. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And this is feedback. Feedback is really important. It allows you to get outside of yourself. And even when you're working with directors, to see just the story and if it's working through the eyes of somebody else. And it helps identify like blind spots and just to see some bumps. And I was working on a film once. I thought it was so great and I was really excited about it. I showed it to somebody. They didn't understand any of it. And I showed it to another person. They didn't understand what it was doing at all. I had to go back and rework that film totally. So what may be working for you might not be working for somebody else. So it's just a good way to check in and be like, is the story working? Is it not? Why? And that's a really helpful thing. And it's good to have like I have like a trusted group of people I share my stuff with, and it really helps. Next slide. Yeah, this is about editing for clients. I've done a bunch of work for other people editing for them. This is a funny music video. So I was tasked to edit a music video. And it had, there were a lot of different things going on with this, and it had to be very artful. The person wanted images of skies and lyrics and a bunch of home movies, and it was a very hard thing for me to balance all this. And I sort of fought for more instrument stuff, and seeing them, so I had to sort of balance that and be honest with him. So if you could play like a little bit of this, maybe.
Now we reminisce, get lost in thoughts like this. Here's why. How we reminisce, just lost in all of this, and why. the 4th of July.
So that was an example of that was a very challenging thing for me because I had all these different things, but I had to sort of be honest with the guy I was working with, be like, this might work, this not might work. And I could have been a lot better with my time with my timetable with this one, but this one sort of taught me, and I will use this for others, that you need to like be very organized when working with people. You need to be like, I can get you a draft by this day. You can mirror comments and just creating a schedule and being honest about what you can do and what you can't and what you think will work and what you can't. And that sort of, I learned a lot from, this was one of my first sort of like music videos that I've edited, and I've done a lot of different types, but yeah, we can go to the next one. Okay, the emotional cycle. This happens every time I make a film. I edit the first things together. I'm so excited. Yay, this is going to be so great. I see the rough cut. I get really depressed. Martin Scorsese said the first time you watch your rough cut, you're going to vomit, or you're going to feel like you're going to vomit. And every film, I feel like I'm going to vomit after my rough cut. Then I put together a new cut and I'm like, wow, this is so much better. This is great. And then I see the final film and then I get depressed again. This happens over and over and over and over again. So I want to tell you guys that that's how, that like, if you feel that, you're not alone, and that it's, you know, I've started noticing that with myself, so I can be like upfront and honest about it. But that's what happens, and that's sort of the fun of it. And you also need to know when to stop. I think you know, you get so warped up in all the details that I think at a certain point when you're getting like the same type of feedback from a lot of people and it's sort of like resolved, you have to at a certain point be like, maybe it's external deadlines, but that can help too. At a certain point be like, I'm going to stop and I'm going to just send it out. And with that, I'm going to stop talking at this presentation and open it up for questions. Thank you guys. So the next slide is just, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Eli. One moment here. Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very insightful. I learned a lot myself as well. Yeah, it was great for our students. So we went a little bit over, but we're going to have probably time for about just a few questions until 6:35, probably a few minutes past that. So one question that we have from a student is, what is one of the biggest challenges that you faced during your films, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I faced a lot. I remember one film, there was a blackout the night of a festival deadline, which was fun. So I had to sit in basically the basement where the one outlet was working and edit all night.
Wow.
You know, stuff, a lot of technical things happen. Like my Premiere crashes every other day. And you sort of get used to it and you have to be like, okay, it crashed again. And you sort of go for it. But yeah, there's a lot of technical things that you sort of need to overcome, especially as an editor.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have another question here. Eli, what is one of your favorite films?
One of my favorite films. I'm gonna go two directions here. A favorite film that I love, Parasite. Ooh, it's like a perfect film in my opinion. It's just like beautiful, amazing. Another film that I take inspiration for like my experimental films is Man with a Movie Camera. I saw that in my film class and like fell in love with it. So that's like an older film, a Ziga Vertov. But it's an older film that I really love. But Parasite is like literally, in my opinion, like just like a perfect film.
Okay, thank you, Eli. And we have one more question for today from Michaela. So she says, when it comes to college application, what would you say is the most important type for the film, for like your portfolio for college, like story editing, cinematography, or something else?
Yeah, when I applied to college, it was hard for me because I was debating between film school and like not film school. And I go to Yale now, and it was a very tough choice. But I chose what I chose because I felt like it was an overall like better education, and I can do film. And I think my best advice for college applications is for film is to, I mean, you're going to submit a film, and I think for Yale, I could submit multiple films, which is very nice. And I was able to sort of just showcase multiple. I think I submitted a documentary, a narrative, and an experimental. And I think that maybe helped me, but just like being very passionate about it. And I sort of, my main crux there was that I was a storyteller. And I tried to put that into every essay and into every like all the other things around me. I tried to center around this one idea that like I want to tell stories. And I put that even into like the academic essays. I'd made it, tied it back to like I want to study history because I want to learn stories so I can tell stories. And I think centering it around your application around like a point, and then you look through every part of it, I think helps. And I also, one thing I did, which is a pro tip, I printed out my application right before I submitted it, like on paper, pretended I was an admissions officer. And I read through it. And I think that helped too, because I'd be like, this is redundant. I say this in this one essay up top, and I don't need to say this in this other essay down below. And doing that, I think really helped me just sort of like be like, how can this essay help me? And this essay help me? And this essay help me, show me as like a storyteller overall.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Eli.
course.
With that, we've concluded our session today with Eli from Yale University. Wonderful having you here today, Eli, and learning about your inspirational story and your many films.